Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 285, Jon Jones versus Ciryl Gane, and this card is stacked from top to bottom with incredible fights. And opening up the pay-per-view main card, we have a middleweight matchup, Bo Nickal versus Jamie Pickett, and this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction. And I'm doing a bunch of UFC 285 prediction videos. I'll link my entire UFC 285 playlist down in the description if you want to go check out any of those videos after this. But make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of those future videos. So this is a fight where you have Bo Nickal. The hype behind Bo Nickal is unbelievable. He's coming off the Dana White's Contender Series, and he's getting a slight step up in competition against Jamie Pickett. And this is his coming out party. He's going to be on one of the biggest UFC fight cards of the year, the return of Jon Jones. And he's fighting Jamie Pickett, who's not the greatest of fighters. He's on a losing streak, but he is better than all the fighters that Bo Nickal has fought up until this point. So this fight is really about, can the Bo Nickal hype train continue? Is he going to go on to bigger and better things? He's calling out Adesanya. He's calling out Pereira. He's calling out Khamzat Chimaev. Is he going to go on to fight some top-ranked guys in the middleweight division? Or is Jamie Pickett going to be his ceiling? Is Jamie Pickett going to go out there and end the hype train of Bo Nickal? And I know a lot of people are looking at this matchup and saying, you know, Bo Nickal is a horrible matchup for Jamie Pickett. And that may be true, but if Jamie Pickett somehow pulls this off, can you imagine the hype that Jamie Pickett would get just ending the hype train of Bo Nickal? You know, Jamie Pickett's not going to get a title shot with a win here, but people would remember his name, and we'd probably get a decent fight in his next fight, to be honest. It would be unfortunate for the UFC. The UFC's kind of setting this fight up for Bo Nickal to win, but if Jamie Pickett wins, there is something to be gained here. And for Bo Nickal, if he wins this fight, I think the UFC is going to give him a few fights just to kind of get his feet wet in the UFC before moving him up in the rankings. But this is going to be the toughest fight of his career in terms of his opponent's skill set. Not in terms of how it's going to play out necessarily, but Jamie Pickett is definitely the best guy that Bo Nickal has ever fought. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Bo Nickal 3-0, Jamie Pickett 13-8. Neither fighter is ranked. You have Bo Nickal is 27 years old. Jamie Pickett is 34. Nickal is 6'1", Pickett is 6'2". Nickal has a 76-inch reach, and Pickett has an 80-inch reach. So a slight height and a 4-inch reach advantage for Pickett, and a youth advantage for Bo Nickal. So if you look at Jamie Pickett, he has 13 pro MMA wins, 8 by knockout, 1 by submission, 4 by decision. Of his 8 losses, he has 2 by knockout, 3 by submission, and 3 by decision. He comes into this fight on a 2-fight losing streak, which made him the perfect candidate to welcome Bo Nickal into the UFC. Because make no mistake, the UFC is using Jamie Pickett as just a way to get Bo Nickal some experience. His last fight was against Dennis Tululin. Not a particularly impressive performance by Jamie Pickett for as long as it lasted. He got TKO'd in the second round. Was doing horrible in the clinch, getting eaten up by elbows. I think he got hurt in the clinch by an elbow. Then eventually he ends up just eating knees over and over, gets dropped and finished on the ground. The fight before that, he lost to Kyle Dawkins. Kyle Dawkins out-wrestled him and eventually submitted him in this first round. And Kyle Dawkins, at this point in time, you know, this wasn't that long ago. This was in February of 2022. As it stands right now, in almost March of 2023, Kyle Dawkins is a dead corpse. So getting out-wrestled and finished by Kyle Dawkins is a really bad look, especially considering it wasn't that long ago. The fight before that, he has a unanimous decision win over Joseph Holmes. I believe this was a 29-28. It's a very competitive fight. They were battling back and forth in the clinch. Had some striking exchanges. I think Pickett just landed the better shots. But even in this fight against Joseph Holmes, Holmes had some success putting Jamie Pickett up against the fence and controlling him there. And really, you look over his UFC resume, he has 6 fights in the UFC. He comes off Dana White's Contender Series as well. He is 2-4 in his UFC career. He lost to Jordan Wright, who I believe just got cut by the UFC after a horrendous performance. And, you know, losing to Kyle Dawkins, I don't even know if Kyle Dawkins is even in the UFC anymore. So even the fighters that he's losing to aren't particularly great, and the resume's horrible. And honestly, with a loss against Bo Nickal, if he does lose against Bo Nickal, I think he'll probably be cut. So if you look at Bo Nickal, there's not much to talk about in terms of resume. He's 3-0. He has 3 professional fights. Out of his 3 wins, 1 win by knockout, 2 by submission. His last fight was in September 2022 against Donovan Beard on Dana White's Contender Series. He won via triangle choke in the first round. Only lasted 52 seconds. The fight before that, Dana White's Contender Series as well, against Zachary Borrego. He submitted him, won via rear naked choke. And the fight before that was outside the UFC against John Nolan, won via KO. All these fights were in 2022. He's won them all by stoppage. But let's be honest, none of these guys are very good competition. These are basically grocery store cashiers at this point. And there's a lot of people who complained after the first Bo Nickal performance against Zachary Borrego that why didn't Bo Nickal get a shot in the UFC after one performance on the Dana White's Contender Series? The reason is the UFC knows how little experience he has, because he only has, 3 pro MMA fights, and they wanted to get him another fight before he got into the UFC. And they knew, okay, we'll give him a guaranteed win against Donovan Beard, and then we'll bring him into the UFC and kind of ease his way into competition in the UFC. But there's not really a lot to go off here. The fights were very short. He basically has a little under 2.5 minutes of total fight time, which is absolutely crazy. But they have been dominant performances. He's gone out there, just out-grappled these guys, submitted them, or the 2 on the Dana White's Contender Series. The other one he knocked out. But we haven't really seen a lot from Bo Nickal, and it's hard to really decipher his skill set based on the level of competition he's fought. And when I look at this fight, I think Bo Nickal is being heavily overhyped because we haven't seen him against any quality opponents yet. And people are acting like, oh, he would maul Khamzat Chimaev, he would maul Alex Pereira, he would maul Israel Adesanya. We don't know what he's going to look like against UFC caliber fighters. But luckily for Bo Nickal, the barrier of entry into the UFC has lowered over the course of the last 5 years. And Jamie Pickett is fringe UFC level, even with that lower barrier of entry. So my official prediction for this fight, I am going Bo Nickal via first round rear naked choke. I think the wrestling of Bo Nickal, he has that NCAA background that people are hyping him up for. Now, in a fight against elite competition, I don't know how he would do. I would favor him against a guy like Darren Till, but I think Darren Till's washed up, just to name somebody who I believe is still ranked in the top 15. But Jamie Pickett is a fringe UFC fighter who's not very good at grappling, got out-grappled by Kyle Dawkins. He's a decently well-rounded fighter. He has okay striking. He has okay grappling. He's not like a complete garbage can. But let's be honest, it's not a high-level skill set. He shouldn't be in the UFC. He's losing to other low-level UFC fighters. And he was planted here for Bo Nickal to go out there and get an impressive performance on a pay-per-view card that's going to draw a lot of eyeballs because of the return of Jon Jones. I think Bo Nickal goes out there, clinches with him immediately, bodies him to the ground, immediately starts transitioning and advancing position. Eventually, he ends up in full mount, or as Jamie Pickett attempts to get to his knees and scramble to his feet, I think he's going to give up his back. I think Bo Nickal's going to latch onto his back and find a rear naked choke. I don't think this fight's going to be super competitive. I would be surprised if it lasts longer than 2.5 minutes. And I know I've sat here and said there's too much hype behind Bo Nickal. But Bo Nickal should steamroll Jamie Pickett. I think most people are expecting that. Jamie Pickett would have to pull off a miracle here. He would have to land a KO shot before Bo Nickal could even get a hold of him. And I just think that is so unlikely for a guy the caliber of Jamie Pickett. And Jamie Pickett's not out there brutally KOing guys. He doesn't have a finish win in the UFC. Outside of, unless you count the Dana White's Contender Series, which I don't necessarily count. So it's not like Jamie Pickett has ungodly power. It's not like he's super fast. I think Bo Nickal's wrestling background, his submission game, his jiu-jitsu, he's going to go out there, ragdoll Jamie Pickett, and find a rear naked choke. I'm going to say 1 minute and 37 seconds into the first round, rear naked choke, submission win for Bo Nickal, and the hype goes insane. Now, I'm curious who the UFC ends up matching him up with next, if he goes out there and dominates Jamie Pickett, because I am interested to see how far Bo Nickal can go. And he's been talking a big game about some of the top-ranked guys. So maybe one more fight after this, and then maybe the UFC will throw him some steep competition because I'm very curious to see how some of those matchups play out. But I think Bo Nickal, easy win at UFC 285. The hype grows, one of the biggest cards. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Is anybody picking Jamie Pickett to defeat Bo Nickal and end the hype train? I'm genuinely curious. Speak now or nobody will believe you. But don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.